Afternoon. I'm Dennis Galucki. Welcome to the 548th Imagine Greater Buffalo program and our 170th YouTube Imagine program, hosted by our wonderful Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. Thank you for joining us today. This program is created by the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature, or C-SAAHN, as I pronounce the acronym, and ImagineLifelongLearning.com. Now, before we get started, just a little housekeeping. Everyone watching will be muted and your video turned off. If you have a question or comment, please type it in the chat box, and we'll go through them at the end of the presentation as time allows. We are recording this program so you can watch it again. You can watch it later on the Downtown Central Library's Facebook page and YouTube channels, and please, we hope you share the link with others. Now, on to our featured speaker. Jack Messmer is the president of the Buffalo Harbor Museum. Now, the Buffalo Harbor Museum has been established to increase knowledge and appreciation of maritime history, art, and science, and in particular, as it relates to the city of Buffalo and the Niagara frontier. This museum collects, preserves, and displays objects of historic, artistic, and scientific interest. Museums open to the public. The museum exhibits provide an overview to the history and development of the waterfront, while related artifacts and photographs to trade and industry that made Buffalo the port of commerce that it was, especially in the early 20th century and late 19th century. So, Jack, take it away and tell us the story of the Buffalo Harbor Museum.
Thank you very much, Dennis. First of all, I'd like to make one disclaimer. He said I'm the president. I am not. I'm the second vice president.
Okay.
So we don't want to offend by presidents. At any rate, I'm just going to go over a brief history of the organization so you have some idea about who and where we came from. First of all, the organization was actually started in 1957 as the Lower Lakes Marine Chapter, which was a part of the Historical Society. Of course, their purpose was pretty much the same thing that we have today. The organization did, in fact, collect a lot of materials for the Historical Society, and also had commissioned a number of models, which we presently have on exhibit at our museum today. The organization basically fell on hard times. Most of the early members had either passed away, and at the same time, there was pretty stringent economic conditions in the early 70s, and the Historical Society basically no longer was willing to provide a place for the organization to meet. So the organization basically went into hibernation. When the Canadiana returned to Buffalo in 1984, there was obviously a huge interest in Buffalo's waterfront. Matter of fact, there were big crowds down on the waterfront just to come to see the Canadiana. And to be honest with you, she was a wreck. At any rate, as a result of this, a number of the members of the Lower Lakes Marine Chapter got together with some new people, and basically they just discussed the possibility of reconstituting the organization. Talks amongst ourselves and along with the Historical Society basically brought about a decision to start a brand new organization, which would be called the Lower Lakes Marine Historical Society. This occurred in 1986. And the paperwork was filed with the state, and we received a charter from the state education department as a 501c3, and received a provisional charter in 1988. Shortly after this, our president, who was at that time was Larry Burke, passed away and donated his very large collection of books, photographs, and models to us. And of course, these were unknown as to where we could put them. So basically, one of our members, a gentleman by the name of Mel Rupp, stepped forward and said, look, I've got some trailers on my property. Would you like to use those? And of course, we said, absolutely. And so in 1989, we got that property to use from Mel, and we established what we called a resource center. In that resource center, we set up our library, and we also held meetings there and put together a series of small displays to basically show off some of the things that we had. Things continued on for till 1996 when Mel Rupp sold his business. And of course, in so doing, those trailers went with it. And the new owners basically said, you need to move. Our president at that time was a gentleman by the name of Mike McCarthy. And basically, he started looking around Buffalo to see whether we could find anything. And we found a building down on Erie Street, which was known as the Baker Building. And it was owned by the bank, by M&T Bank. Mike approached the bank and basically convinced them that the smart thing to do with the bank's property was to give it to us. And in fact, M&T did, in fact, give us the building. And as I said, this was the Howard Baker Company building. And this was one of the oldest establishments in Buffalo that could actually trace its history back to the 1830s. And interestingly enough, it was a ship chandlery. Now, for those who aren't familiar with ship chandleries, that basically is a business that supplies vessels with anything that they could possibly need. And by that, I mean, it could be block and tackle, rope, sails, but it could also be food, dishes, you name it. If you needed it aboard a boat, that's what these chandleries jobs were. At any rate, we got the building in 1997. Obviously, it was in bad shape on the inside and the outside for that matter. We rehabbed the building using grants and opened up the building in 2000. And we have been there ever since. Unfortunately, at the present time, all we use is the first floor for the general public. But we do have 3 more floors that someday we hopefully will be able to use. Unfortunately, without an elevator, those are not accessible to the general public. With that, basically, one other thing I want to mention is that the organization does, in fact, have a museum, which is open, by the way, 3 days a week, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays from 10 to 3, in order to basically disseminate the information that we have gathered and to show some of the products that we have gathered from Buffalo's waterfront. We have also published 3 books at this junction to basically spread the knowledge that we have gained. And we also publish a newsletter called The Harbor Master, which is coming out or comes out 6 times a year. And we have been publishing that now for 37 years, or yeah, I think that's 37, yes. Okay. The books that we've produced are Fire and Water, which is the disasters of Buffalo Harbor and its surrounding waterfront, which was published in 2015. Buffalo's Waterfront, A History in Pictures in 2011. And in 1989, we produced a Waterview Guide to Buffalo Harbor. And we now have a new book that came out in 2019, which is Boats Built in Buffalo. So all of that, of course, is to basically show off what we have and what knowledge we've gained. With that having been said, it's kind of an overview of our organization. If you have any further questions about it, certainly you can bring those up at the end. For now, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say. I do have a video for you that I prepared a number of years ago for the Rotary Club, and the title of it was The Best Kept Secret in Buffalo. And the problem is that that statement is still true today. Most people still don't know who we are or where we are. And we've been here at the particular location that I mentioned, that is on Erie Street, for 24 years, open for 24 years. So with that, I think maybe the best thing to do is to begin the video.
Buffalo Harbor Museum, one of Buffalo's best kept secrets. The Buffalo Harbor Museum is located less than 1/2 mile from Buffalo's Erie Basin and Canal Side at 66 Erie Street, which, by the way, is really at the corner of Franklin and Swan. Buffalo Harbor Museum is operated by Lower Lakes Marine Historical Society, which was formed in 1986 and incorporated as a 501c3. In 1997, we acquired our present home from M&T Bank. One of the neat features about our building is that it really was an integral part of Buffalo's maritime past, having housed Howard H. Baker and Company's ship chandlery, whose business can be traced back to the 1840s. For those who don't know what a ship chandlery is or was, the simplest explanation would be to say that if you needed it for a boat or the men and women who served aboard it, you could get it from the ship chandler. Ropes, running lights, lanterns, caulking materials, food, bedding supplies, clothing, just about anything you could think of. In 1999, we opened our doors at the present location after remodeling the first floor of our building as a library and museum, with an emphasis on the maritime heritage of Buffalo and its role in the development of the economy of the Great Lakes region. The museum and library are open to the public during the summer months on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., and during the remaining seasons on Thursdays and Saturday. Group tours can be arranged by appointment. The museum is open and staffed by volunteers. There is no admission at this point. The Buffalo Harbor Museum does have memberships, and we publish a bi-monthly newsletter that gives a chronology of present maritime activity in and around Buffalo. In addition, we also have articles of historical events that have taken place in and around Buffalo and the Great Lakes. We have also published 3 books on Buffalo's waterfront. Our most recent, Fire and Water, was released in October of 2015. It details the waterfront disasters that have taken place in and around Buffalo Harbor. So, what are the stories told within the museum? Certainly, one of the most important of these is the Erie Canal. It turned Buffalo into a major metropolis by the 1850s. However, before Buffalo could become the western terminus of the Erie Canal, Buffalo had to build a harbor. The original Buffalo Creek was impassable due to a sandbar across its mouth. This problem was overcome by Samuel Wilkeson, who took the Buffalo by the horns and not only financially backed the harbor improvements, but was the supervisor of the work. In May of 1822, the harbor was opened, and with its success, Buffalo became the western terminus of the Erie Canal over the village of Black Rock. At first, it was the inner harbor that was developed. One such improvement was the Evans Slip. Other major improvements included the City Ship Canal, Ohio Basin, and Erie Basin. All these in an effort to accommodate the massive trade that developed at Buffalo. Eventually, in 1869, the outer harbor was begun, and it would proceed from north to south, eventually reaching Lackawanna in 1903, creating a continuous breakwater of roughly 3.5 miles. Buffalo Harbor development would continue until the mid-20th century, when it took on its present configuration. The Erie Canal also resulted in the development of Buffalo's first major industry, shipbuilding. Buffalo became the premier shipbuilding port on the Great Lakes, turning out some of the largest and most elegant steamers of the times. Some of these vessels exceeded 300 feet in length by the mid-1850s. Vessels of these dimensions would not be seen again until nearly the turn of the 20th century on the Great Lakes. These massive vessels were all passenger steamers, each more opulent than its predecessor. It was stated that the interior of the steamers were as elegant as any hotel in New York City. This brings us to another facet of the harbor that most people don't associate with Buffalo or the Great Lakes. That is cruising. If I were to speak of cruising, most people's minds would conjure up trips to Alaska, the Caribbean, or the Mediterranean. But from the 1840s through the early 1950s, Buffalo was one of the hubs for numerous cruise ships. The early steamers were designed to accommodate immigrants seeking passage to the West, but also to entice the masses to take vacations aboard the passenger steamers. Later vessels such as the 500-foot C&B, built in 1913, were designed specifically for the week-long cruise up and down the Great Lakes. Not all of the passenger boats on the Great Lakes were designed for extended cruises. Some, such as the Ocean Bedell, were day cruisers or ferries taking people to the many resorts around the western New York region, such as the Bedell House on Grand Island. Probably the best known of the day boats locally was the Canadiana, which operated continuously from 1910 to 1956. At the museum, we are in the process of putting together a display on the Canadiana and its destination, Crystal Beach. This display will feature the latest addition to the museum, the Canadiana's bell. One of the most iconic features in Buffalo is the 1833 lighthouse. It is on the seal of the city. The lighthouse is the oldest standing lighthouse on the Great Lakes and is located on the South Pier at the mouth of Buffalo River. However, there have been other lighthouses. In the 1850s, the Horseshoe Reef Light was constructed. This light was to assist vessels that might be headed down the Niagara River in avoiding Horseshoe Reef. The Outer Harbor Light, or Breakwater Light, was constructed in the 1870s and was located at the northern end of the breakwater and just behind it. This would become the main light for the harbor from that time until 1962, when it was replaced by a new automated light. The Breakwater Light had the rather dubious distinction of being known as the Leaning Light. In July of 1958, the lighthouse was struck by the freighter Frontenac, tilting it by 15 degrees. In 1961, this lighthouse was demolished. Personally, my favorite stories told at the museum are those concerning the local shipwrecks. The Great Lakes have claimed many vessels, and a number of them have been lost within a short distance of the harbor. The W.C. Richardson was sunk about 1 mile off the breakwater in a fierce storm in December of 1909. Although salvage attempts were made, her remains are still there. Another shipwreck is Lightship number 82, which was sunk between Sturgeon Point and Point Abano in November of 1913. She was lost in what was considered the worst storm ever on the Great Lakes. The light vessel was lost with her entire crew of 6. However, 2 years later, in 1915, her hull was raised. She was rebuilt and eventually saw service again on the lakes and ocean. Another vessel sunk off Buffalo, a short distance from Waverly Shoals and about 3 miles from the harbor entrance, is the tug Acme. The tug was sunk in 1902 by the freighter Wilkes-Barre, which was being towed through an ice field out into the ice-free lake. The Acme ran into a ridge of ice, which stopped her dead, and the Wilkes-Barre's momentum carried her into the stern of the tug, causing her to sink. The 4-man crew were fortunate to escape drowning. She too remains a ghost of the past on the bottom. The Buffalo and Western New York region has had a number of historic maritime firsts. The first vessel built above the falls, Le Griffin, was constructed at Cayuga Island near Niagara Falls in 1679. Unfortunately, she had a very short career, having disappeared on the return leg of her first journey. The first steamboat built above the falls was the Walk in the Water. She was built at Black Rock in 1818. The Walk in the Water was the new technology of her day. She too had a short career, being driven ashore in 1821 off of what is today the Outer Harbor. The first operational vertical lift elevator powered by steam was built by Joseph Dart and Robert Dunbar. It was located near the Evans Slip. Dart's dream changed the way grain-laden vessels were unloaded. No longer were the backs of Irishmen the cheapest and fastest way to unload grain-laden vessels. It also made Buffalo the busiest port on the Great Lakes. The first commercial iron vessel on the Great Lakes was the Merchant, which was built at Buffalo in 1862 by David Bell. This type of vessel proved to be quite economical to operate. In the spring, when wooden vessel owners were busy cleaning out the dry rot, replacing planks, and caulking seams, the iron boat was given a fresh coat of paint and was underway. Speaking of iron vessels, do you know what the Navy's first iron vessel was? If you guessed the Monitor, you're incorrect. The Michigan was built in 1843 and entered service on the Great Lakes in 1844. She was the Navy's first iron vessel, not ironclad, but of iron construction except for her deck and cabins. The Michigan's name was changed to Wolverine in 1905. The Michigan Wolverine served on the lakes from 1844 till 1926, visiting Buffalo regularly. Her remains survived at Erie, Pennsylvania until 1949, when she was cut up for scrap. The museum is fortunate to have the builder's plates from the Michigan, a painting, and a scale model which have been incorporated into a display. Buffalo was the first and only Great Lakes port to construct aircraft carriers during World War II. The passenger steamers C and B and Greater Buffalo were converted into flat tops, known as the Wolverine and Sable respectively. These vessels were used in training Navy pilots how to land and take off on an aircraft carrier within the safe confines of the Great Lakes. If you would like to learn more about Buffalo and Western New York's maritime past, stop in at the museum. After your visit, I'm confident you will spread the word about the Buffalo Harbor Museum. Hopefully then, it will not remain such a well-kept secret.
Jack, that's a wonderful video that you compiled for that speech, Rotary Club speech. My hat's off to all the people that you've referenced that got this to this current time. Obviously, Buffalo next year, with the 200th anniversary of the Erie Canal, will be looking more closely at the harbor. How do you envision, and I'm thinking in that video you alluded to the Crystal Beach angle that a lot of people alive might still remember. How do you see yourself preparing for next year, and then the following year is America's 250th anniversary? Again, 2 years of thinking about our history locally as it connects with the national history story. How do you envision that looking for your museum?
Well, at least for next year, we have been in discussions with the state, or the organization that the state has put together for the 200th anniversary of the canal. And we're just kind of, matter of fact, we just got the email today as to what was happening, because they said, had asked us, would we be interested? And we said, of course. And but we hadn't heard a thing from them, and we had sent them a couple of emails and heard nothing back. But I understand that's because there was some kind of major canal society happening in Europe this year, and that they were waiting for that to end to basically get things off the ground. So to be specific, obviously we'll be open during all of that time. Probably will be open more than the 3 days a week that we're presently open, especially during the periods when they're going to have activities here in Buffalo. But as far as the 250th anniversary of the country, I haven't thought that far in advance.
Well, they're back-to-back years. How about schools? Do you attract school tours?
We are open to schools, but we've only had typically maybe 1 or 2 per year.
Well,
and my understanding from a lot of them is that getting funding to get buses to go to the school, go from the schools to here, are not easy to come by.
All right. Well, let's see if we've got some questions from the audience at all. Melissa?
Actually, so far we do not.
Any questions from the library, folks? Joy, yourself included. Well, tying it into a library, you had mentioned, Jack, that you have quite a collection of things. What are your plans for potentially having that resource available? Hard to digitize everything, but how can you make it available to a public that would find you a valuable resource, I would think?
Well, obviously, people are welcome to come in. You don't have to be a member in order to come in. And we do help those people out with the library and any materials that they're searching for. We get a fair number of requests via email through our website, asking, specifics about individuals or places or vessels. And we usually do a certain amount of research to kind of fill in what we have to those people. But in some cases, they're asking for an awful lot of work on our part.
Whoops.
And we say, well, here's what we can give you, but if you need more, you need to come and visit. So yeah, I mean, it's a tough call to make, but some people are asking a lot.
Yeah. Sounds good. And again, you did mention a project you were working on tied to Crystal Beach and some pieces.
Well,
of
that's done now. I mean,
Is
that was we were working on that. I mean, like I said, that video was done in 2015, and the Crystal Beach thing is now complete. It's been up for quite a while now. We do have, by the way, on a regular basis, what we call a rotating display, which is basically about every 4 months or so, we put up a new display just to have something new there that we haven't discussed before. For example, we did one on the what was it called? The war in 1837 in Canada. Oh, the Canadian Rebellion. There we go. The Canadian Rebellion, which of course had some ramifications here in the United States. In particular, they burned one of the U.S. vessels at Niagara Falls, and precipitated a major incident, which of course, by the way, is one of the reasons why the federal government put the Michigan Wolverine here on the Great Lakes, because of course, tensions between Great Britain, Canada, and the United States were pretty bad in the 1830s and 1840s. So we did our display on that, the Mackenzie Rebellion. There we go. The Mackenzie Rebellion, and he by the way, fled to Grand Island and set up moved across the water to Navy Island and set up a camp there, and basically challenged the Canadian or the British government. Fortunately, it didn't come to blows in the end, but it came close. And one man was actually killed. And then we had a display on Tonawanda, our next door neighbor as far as Great Lakes ports are concerned. We're thinking about doing one on Dunkirk as well. We also did one on the coal docks, which was a major business here in Buffalo, exporting of coal. Buffalo obviously doesn't have any coal here that we're digging up, but it was all coming in from Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia, and Kentucky for that matter. But Buffalo became the distribution point basically for the Great Lakes for the coal.
Yeah,
and,
one other dimension that I've always been intrigued with is I've heard it reference how many immigrants pass through Buffalo Harbor versus Ellis Island or something like that. Do you know where those records are? Who has somebody kept track? Is there a historical log of the immigrants that came through Buffalo to get out either west or settle here?
No, there is none. There are no historical documents that actually tell, because theoretically Buffalo isn't a port of arrival as far as immigrants are concerned. They came in lots of places, New York City being one of the major ones. But because of the Erie Canal, they obviously accessed it because this was the most efficient way to get to the west. The only other place where you had a lot of immigration coming from was on the Canadian side or down through the St. Lawrence. So those really were the gateways. And of course, with the Erie Canal, it was a lot simpler when you entered the United States, which is where many of them were coming. to basically head to the west. And keep in mind, in those days, the federal government was effectively giving away land in the old Northwest, which would be places like Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Wisconsin, Minnesota. And that basically that's most of those immigrants came through here, but nobody has any numbers to, that they can say, well, that's what the records at the customs house say.
Yeah, I often wondered because I have heard that expression that it was.
There's little doubt that many, probably certainly more than, I mean, most people will tell you that more probably came here than came through Ellis Island. But keep in mind, Ellis Island it only opened up later. Immigration was being controlled pretty well. In those early days in the early 1800s, I don't think the government was too careful about immigration.
Dennis, we do have a question. Somebody is asking, the video that you showed is excellent. Is that video available on YouTube or somewhere else?
No.
Well, wait, you say no, Jack, but I'll tell you, right now, we just recorded it.
That's
and
true.
on YouTube, so it's now available on YouTube if you go to Imagine Buffalo. How's that?
Okay.
That is true.
Well, then I guess it's available.
There it is in that sense, but you're right. It otherwise wasn't. Do you have people, volunteers that go out to schools, Jack, rather than wait for them to come to you?
No, we have not, but we were looking into, I just saw some new technology. We hosted a convention for the Association for Great Lakes Maritime History 2 weeks ago on September 4th, 5th, and 6th, I think it was. And I saw some technology that they had that would be something that would give us the opportunity to go out to schools and basically have something to show.
How does that look? What is that technology?
Well,
the
best way I can describe it to you, you ever watch anybody play, what do they call that? Xbox, and they have those big goggles that they put on. Well, some group in Wisconsin has actually produced these goggles that are tied to videos that will basically allow you to explore shipwrecks that they have videoed. And we want to look into that technology to see whether or not, because this would give us something to basically show the kids. One of the things is kids are a tough crowd. Having been a teacher for 35 years, I know you just can't go in there and just talk to them.
Yeah, you have to do that. And I'm going to throw it back to you in this sense. How does the library tell stories that relate to the Buffalo Harbor? Are there books? Is there interest that overlaps and connects maybe with an organization like the Buffalo Harbor Museum?
Well, first of all, I think we would love to be able to send people over to the museum to, see what is available. I think that would be super when the museum is open. Certainly, we have plenty of resources, books, and other materials that relate to maritime history here that are available to the public. And I would like to think, and as soon as we get done with this program today, I'm going to look up and see if we have your books, Jack, that you mentioned earlier in your talk, available to people through the library. I certainly hope we do.
I think you have most of them, yes.
Great.
Maybe not all of them, but most of them.
That's good. Ann, any other questions?
I don't see any others having come through.
We can wrap it up. I'm not sure if it's a sad statement, but a true statement. One of Buffalo's best kept secrets. It's both. So we've done our little part here to reveal a well-kept secret and make it more available for people to at least talk about and view. That's part of my goal with this Imagine program and the fact that they are archived now on YouTube. All these 160 plus programs we've done since COVID, and yours is a great story. And I trust with next year's focus on the Erie Canal, the collaboration of exploring more the Children's Museum right in the harbor, the activities that are going on there. Explore Buffalo does tours. The lighthouse, hopefully someday we'll have public tours on an occasional basis. There's a great story to tell that really are the roots of Buffalo. We don't exist without being right at the corner of the Niagara River and the Great Lakes right here in Buffalo, New York. That was the grand vision of Joseph Ellicott in designing the city. So the harbor plays that part. It grew from the harbor, basically. So Jack, thank you very much. Good volunteers that make themselves available. It's part of why I created the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature, is to recognize and acknowledge lifelong learning communities, especially the volunteers of all these cultural organizations like yours that do just a great job here in Buffalo. Great job with the volunteers and a great service to our community. So thank you very much, Jack. And folks, thank you. Next week, we're going to hear about a new 501c3 to be, but a newly organized not-for-profit that hopes to become just that. And that's the Friends of Griffin Mills, little town in the town of Aurora. And it's got a very interesting story to tell, not the least of which is that Sojourner Truth spoke there at the little Presbyterian church. And that's what we'll be hearing about from Alan Davis, the president of that organization called Friends of Griffin Mills. So hope to see you next week, and be well in between. I'm Dennis Galucki. Have a good day.